Hey guys, this is Jeremy, and I'm here today to talk to you about an amazing military engineer by the name of Sebastien Vauban, who, like all great things, is French. Born in 1633 to a family of minor nobility, Vauban was orphaned at age 10, so he spent most of his boyhood amongst the local peasantry. Fortunately for him, he was taken in by a religious group called the Carmelites, who instructed him in math and science. At age of 17, he joined the rebels against King Louis XIV, where he was quickly recognized for his skill. Unfortunately, he was then captured by the king's men, and despite being a rebel and a prisoner, was treated extremely well. This impressed Vauban to a point where he swore allegiance to the king. From there, he accepted an apprenticeship to one of the leading engineers of the time, the Chevalier de Clerville. His apprenticeship completed at 22, he was put in charge of several assaults and sieges, all of which succeeded. He climbed his way through the ranks of the military until he eventually achieved the exalted rank of Marshal of France and personal friend to the king. His secret lay in a 12-step tactic he developed, involving mostly trenches. Vauban's tactic was simple yet effective. He would start by digging a trench labeled first parallel. The purpose of this one is to cut off enemy reinforcements and supplies from the outside, as well as keep them trapped inside the fort, effectively isolating them. He would then dig parallels closer and closer to the fort, connected by the smaller perpendicular trenches until he'd reached the walls. At this point, he would send in a group of sappers to breach the walls, effectively creating an entrance. Vauban was good at destroying forts, but he was also good at creating them. He helped revolutionize the standard design for the forts at the time by changing the overall shape from square to star shape. Now there are two main reasons for doing this. The first is, with artillery becoming more common, it's advantageous for the walls to have a high angle so that they can simply deflect the cannonballs, dissipating the energy, rather than suffer the impact of a head-on collision. The second advantage of a star-shaped fort is to eliminate the dead zones, an area where the attacker is safe from the defender's fire. Back in the 17th century, they didn't split the disciplines as we do today. This means that to be the king's head engineer, you had to be a man of many, many talents. By today's standards, he would have had to have knowledge in masonry, civil engineering, geology, architecture, war strategy, and many more. The list goes on. He also implemented the concept of layered forts in nearly every fort he built. Though it was not an original idea of his, it proved to be extremely effective, as the defendants could simply fall back if one of the forward sections fell to the enemy. Vauban also helped shape the borders of France. He was a man who firmly believed in using the landscape to his advantage, even if it meant giving up a little bit of territory. This is perfectly illustrated by the Mont Dauphin. This fortress is located in a valley in the southeast corner of France. As we can see, it is easily defendable as it is surrounded on three sides by cliff face. Now, Vauban had to convince the king not to build a fort further along the edge of his territory, and indeed risk losing some of that territory in order to build this fort in such a desirable position. Here we see the Barrage Vauban, or the Vauban Dam, located in eastern France in Strasbourg. Though picturesque, this dam could be closed at a moment's notice to flood the entire south end of the city, should it ever be taken over by the enemy. Notice the many small arches close together. After studying the river, Vauban found that the flow was 58 cubic meters per second, and this design was necessary to counter the force generated when the dam is closed. I'd like to wrap things up by telling you how I was introduced to Vauban in the first place. I had the good fortune to be traveling in Belgium to this castle, Bouillon. Constructed in the Middle Ages, Bouillon is obviously not an original Vauban creation, though he did travel there to renovate the place in his era. It was during a tour of this castle that we came by a staircase known as the Vauban staircase. This staircase is famous because it's in typical Vauban style in that it lacks a central support column. Instead, each brick is piled on top one another in such a way that the entire weight supports itself. This is a basic drawing of the distribution of the forces in the staircase. As a young engineer, I found it particularly fascinating that something of this weight and size could essentially support itself with nothing but a little bit of clever placement. Despite being famous in this time, Vauban has fallen into obscurity, though his works can still be seen standing, scattered throughout France. And despite not identifying with any of the modern disciplines of today, the man truly was an amazing engineer.